It wasn't the toughest fight I've ever had, but I really couldn't tell you what was. I've been in so many fights in my time that all of it has just been a blur. I barely even registered my opponent's face being slammed into the pavement, his blood and brains seeping out onto the concrete. I straightened myself and took a look at my new girlfriend, who had come here with the other guy. "Let's go home," I said. "Yes," she said, she gingerly. She raised her open-toed heel and tiptoed around the other guy's body, careful not to step in the small patches of blood around him. She reached me and then took my arm. She squeezed my bicep and then leaned into it. "What was your name again?" "Call me Ike." "Okay, Ike." Sylvia, the most beautiful girl in Rumble Way, said softly. "I'm Sylvia, but I take it that you already knew that." "I didn't, actually." "Oh, you liar," she said. "It's true." "Sure it is," she said, sounding amused. "You killed someone for a girl you've never even heard of before. I liked your personality." Sylvia laughed. "Oh, that's funny," she sneered, squeezing my arm a little bit more firmly. "I can tell we're going to get along just fine. As long as you put out for me, and only me, we're not going to have any problems." Her eyes sparkled. "You won't have to worry about that," she promised. "I'm nothing if not loyal." I wasn't sure how serious she was being. It was true that I hadn't done anything with her yet. She had told me flat out when I first spoke to her that she already had a boyfriend. But after I had told her that I would kill him and take her home, she had seemed excited by the idea. She had done exactly what she had said she was going to do. I dug it. I hadn't bothered bringing my own car now that the other guy was dead. We would just take his home. He had left the keys in the ignition, so I simply got in and closed the door behind me. Sylvia sat next to me. She removed her heels and set her feet on the dash. The skirts of her long dress hitched up her leg, showing it off to me and only me. "So what now, stranger?" she purred. I considered. The adrenaline of killing the other guy had still not worn off, but if someone were to jump me now and take her from me, I wouldn't be able to defend myself. I could fuck her, right here, right now in broad daylight, but I wanted to tease her a little. "I want to play video games." The smile on her face faded. "What?" I started the car, and we took off down the car. The girl was still staring at me rather intently, her brow furrowed. "You want to play video games?" "Yeah. When I'm right here." "What does you being here have anything to do with it?" She huffed at me, her cheeks pulsing angrily. I did not look at her, instead focusing intently on the road. She leaned towards me and began rubbing my shoulder with her hand. "Come on," she cajoled. "Surely there's someone else you would rather do instead." "Nope." She leaned forward and licked my cheek. "Nothing?" "No." She punched me on the arm. I barely felt it. "What? Am I not good enough for you?" I laughed at her, and she became even more upset. "I'll throw myself out of the car," she said. I stepped on the pedal, began to go faster. "I mean it. My broken body will be on you." It was an empty threat, and we both knew it. She unclasped her seatbelt and grabbed hold of the car handle, but did not twist it open. She didn't have the guts. She stared at me intently, gazing my reaction as I pulled into the driveway. "Home," I said finally. She looked. She frowned. She tilted her head. "You live here?" she asked in disgust. It was a small apartment building. Dingy, unkempt, and uncared for. "On the 4th floor, yeah," I said, as I step out of the car. "I own a small apartment, 1 bathroom, 1 regular room." "Not even a real bedroom?" she asked with disgust. "God, I already want to move. She opened the door and stepped outside. She stared up at the building with a degree of trepidation. Who owns the building? She asked. Who else lives here? Just the normal, everyday scum. Drive them off, she said immediately. Make this place ours. I want it done by the end of the week. I shrugged my shoulders as she walked towards me. You're lucky you killed my last boyfriend, she said. Now, I don't have anywhere else to live. I reached my arm around her waist and pulled her close to me. She groaned, rolling her eyes as she leaned into me. We stepped into the apartment, and her eyes flitted around. Wait a minute, she said. Where am I supposed to go when you're gaming? You just sit there and watch. Very funny, she huffed. Intuitively, she dusted off with the counter with her finger. A thick layer of dust stuck to her finger. Ever heard of a duster? Ever tried using one yourself? Very funny, she huffed. I'm not lifting a finger while I'm here. She turned her head, glancing around the room. Where's the wine? At the store. You're horrible, she said. Horrible. She slammed the refrigerator shut and turned to look at me. I had already sat down in the chair and turned on the TV. I reached for my controller and began to play. She stood behind me, her arms crossed. I could feel her eyes on the back of my head. So this is my life now, huh? She asked. I get to sit here and watch you play. What are you playing? PlayStation. She wrinkled her nose. Xbox is better, she said derisively. You're only saying that to be a contrarian. You're right, I am. She huffed. I'm just a stupid girl who doesn't know anything. Is that right? You're smart enough to figure that out. She stomped her foot. You're terrible, she said. Positively terrible. She explored the apartment, complaining about the tiniest little thing. The arrangement of the room, the furniture, what needed to be maintained, and what she wanted to get rid of. I ignored all of her comments and focused entirely on my game. Before long, she had completely run out of things to complain about. It was a very small room, and she sat beside me on the couch next to my chair. Is this where you learn to fight? She asked derisively. By playing video games. No, I said. I fight in real life too. So you come home and fight some more, Sylvia said. She wrinkled her nose. Men, she said with disgust. Do you think of anything other than sex, food, and fighting? She had extended her leg and waved it in front of me, as if trying to distract me from my game. I ignored her. You're a bastard, she said with disgust. You're a complete... She stopped. She sniffed the air, looking around. What's that? She stood up and made her way to the door. She opened it and peered her head outside. Oh, Christ, the building is in fire. And so it was. Without a word, I reached forward and began to gather up my game console. Sylvia whirled on me, eyes blazing. Now's not the time. She stopped. A rock had just connected with my single window. Without hesitation, she opened it and peered down. What is it? A small, bespectacled boy was looking up at her. She pulled back in disgust. Sylvia, wait. She shut the door. We have to go, she said. Now. Who was that? She shivered. His name is Evan Green, I think, she said. I promised I would marry him when we were kids, and well, he's never let go of the idea. I looked at her. For the first time, she looked somewhat ashamed. I shoved the last of my games into my bag and stood up. Come on, let's go. The hallway was completely covered in flames. We had no choice but to climb out of the window. The boy was watching us as we climbed down. We were halfway down when the fire escape began to fall apart. Sylvia screamed as I wrapped my arms around her and jumped the remainder of the distance. It was 2 stories down and onto solid concrete. I had to land on my feet, and I winced. You can't fight like a man, so you resort to these cheap tricks, huh? Sylvia shouted. It took me a while to realize she was talking to Evan. I would do anything for you, Sylvia, he said. He took a tentative step forward. I love you. Sylvia pushed herself off of me. Are you going to let him speak to me like that? She asked me. You're my boyfriend. Protect me. I looked at him. I had never seen such a small and pathetic-looking kid. But the fact of the matter is that he had burned down my apartment. I was pissed. Hold this. I shoved my bag into her hands, and she took it, a little bit awkwardly, as I stepped towards him. He flinched, looking at me with his fists clenched. I raised my own fist and hit him hard across the face. He staggered, but he rolled with the punch. I realized immediately that this wasn't the first time he had fought for Sylvia. I hit him again, and he gasped, blood flying out of his mouth. He may have been used to getting hit, but he certainly wasn't able to put up much of a fight. He fell to the concrete with a resounding crash and a moan. I stood over him and then turned back around towards Eva. No, she shouted at me. You idiot. The boy lunged forward, wrapping his arm around my leg with one arm while plunging a knife down onto my heel. I buckled, and he laughed cruelly as he yanked my leg, tripping me up. He removed the knife and got on top of me, his knife raised. I rolled around and backhanded him so hard that he went tumbling to the concrete. With my leg in the condition it was in, I couldn't stand on it. I had to just throw myself at him. He raised the knife to defend himself, but I ripped it out of his grip and punched him, square in the jaw. His head shot back and then slammed into the concrete with such force that it shattered open. Blood and brains seeped out into the concrete as I stood up. Thanks, Sylvia said as I limped back over to her. The bastard never leave me alone. I looked at her. Where's my bag? She smiled at me. You left it in the building, remember? I stared at her and then turned my head towards the building. My bag was now caught in the fallen fire escape. It had caught fire. I knew instantly that everything in it was ruined. I should hit you too, I told her. Oh, please, she said as she wrapped her arms around me. I like it when it hurts. We have to find a new place, though. Her smile shone even brighter. We do, she said. You know, I'm starting to feel really good about this relationship. You've done more for me than the last guy already. What was his name? She looked confused for a minute. The last guy. What was his name? Her smile faded.